Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. My name is Nalo, and today we're going to be taking a look at an investment PLAYSKIN loadout. I'm going to be doing the full loadout, so this means every single item in CSGO. I'll pick out a finish for it that balances a decent looking appearance and also investment potential. This video took a long time to make because of how many items actually exist in CSGO. And before we get into it, let's take a look at the sponsor for today's video, SkinsMonkey. This video is sponsored by SkinsMonkey. SkinsMonkey is a website that you can take all of the skins that you don't want anymore and upgrade them into something pretty cool. Even if the item that you trade for is on a trade hold, it'll be added to your SkinsMonkey backpack until it's ready to be withdrawn. When you use code Nalo, there's actually two bonuses that you get on the site. The first one is an up to $5 bonus when trading skins, and the second one is an added 5% bonus when you're topping up your balance. And this is on top of the 30% bonus they already give you. And even if you don't have any skins to trade, SkinsMonkey actually has daily, weekly, and monthly giveaways that you can enter completely for free with a variety of ways to gain more entries. So check out this great site, SkinsMonkey, by using my link in the description below for these extra bonuses. Alright guys, before we get into this video, here are some factors that I took into account. Generally, this will apply to most of the items on this list. This video would be extremely long if I went into depth about all of these items, so go ahead and read these factors to get an understanding of what makes the majority of these items a decent investment. I'm not going to go in depth about all of the items on this list. Alright guys, starting off with the pistols, we have the CZ Auto Syndicate. It matches the M4 and looks really good in game. It has a fairly limited supply, and it's a great trade-up material. Next up for the Deagle, I went with the Emerald Jormungandr, but if you're not ballin', a good alternative is the Midnight Storm. Both of these items look absolutely fantastic. The Emerald Jormungandr even has special patterns that you can get, and both have extremely solid investment potential, both because of trade-ups and just because there's a lot of demand for them. Next up for the Duallies, I went with a little bit of a weirder one in the Cobra Strike. This is actually from the Hydra collection, which is definitely showing its age now. They're really fantastic looking Duallies. Pretty much anyone that I've seen that has a solid green loadout is going with these. I also wanted to mention the Duallies Emerald. I think these are also great, but they're kind of plain. For the 5.7, I went with the Berries and Cherries. Obviously, this trades directly up to the blue Phosphor, which is an extremely popular item. And also the Berries and Cherries is a pretty cool PLAYSKIN, giving you some good customizability with its pattern indexes. And there's quite a few cool little sticker crafts you can do with this thing. Moving on to the Glock, we have the Twilight Galaxy or the Gamma Doppler. Both are fantastic looking Glocks, especially in CS2. Gamma Doppler is not going to destroy the bank like the Twilight Galaxy will, but the Twilight Galaxy is extremely limited in supply these days. Moving on to the P2K, we have the Ocean Foam or the Dispatch. I don't think many people are willing to spend as much as the Ocean Foam costs for a P2000, but as it does trade up to the Fire Serpent, it does have some trade up demand there, and the pattern on it's pretty cool. The Dispatch is obviously not going to cost you as much, but it's also good for trade ups in the Control collection, and it's kind of cool. There's not really a lot of good looking P2000s. Moving on to the P250, we have the Digital Architect. A bit of a newer one, but it is a collection item, so it does have some limited supply there. And as far as P250s go, it's pretty good looking. Now moving on to the R8 Revolver, I don't really recommend buying and investing in R8 Revolvers, as it's a very unpopular item to use in CS. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably go with the R8 Blaze. And if the R8 does get a buff in CS2, then the Blaze will probably be a pretty popular one for people to go with. Moving on to the Tech 9, once again suffering from not really having a whole ton of really standout awesome skins, but I went with the Bamboo Forest, quite an older Tech 9 these days, and is pretty decent looking. Another alternative is the Tech 9 Hades, which is sort of basic, but it does have a really cool thing with its pattern when the item is more worn. And finally for the USP, I went with the Orion. If you didn't know, the Orion is actually removed from the game. You can't get it from cases anymore. You can, however, receive it from a trade-up. The Orion looks absolutely fantastic. It's a very iconic item that a lot of people will have nostalgia for going into CS2. And its price has shown some pretty good performance recently. Alright guys, moving on to the rifles, we're going to start with the AK, which is going to be either the Hydroponic or the Redline. Obviously the Hydroponic is going to break the bank, so I went with the Redline for a cheaper option. But the Hydroponic is one of the most sought after AKs in the entire game. It looks absolutely fantastic, and it got a slight buff with the CS2 lighting system due to its metallic finish. Moving on to the silenced M4, we have the blue Phosphor. It would be kind of silly not to pick this. It's quite expensive, but we are talking about rifles here, so a little bit higher cost is expected. As for the unsilenced M4, we have the Cybersecurity. This is from the Broken Fang case, so it's somewhat limited in supply in that regard. It also looks absolutely fantastic, and it's actually not too terribly expensive. Onto the AUG, we have the Carved Jade, an item that's seen quite a lot of talk recently. This item has probably one of the best glow-ups ever going into CS2. It's from my collection, so it's semi-limited in supply. For the AWP, I went with the Silk Tiger. The Silk Tiger is a collection pink, so very limited in supply. It's one of the most unique skins in the game, having a very, very weird color palette, but this definitely does have a cult following and looks really nice. Moving on to the Famas, there's there's really not a lot of great looking Famas in the game, but I went with the Meltdown. This trades up to the Coalition or Glock Gamma Doppler, and seeing as you can potentially get a Glock Emerald from that, this is a popular trade up to do, and the Meltdown looks pretty good as far as Famas go. As for the G3, there's really no good looking G3s in the entire game. The only one that I personally like is the Dream Glade, but that one's not a very good investment because it's from a recent case. So I went ahead and went with the Orange Kimono, which as far as G3s go is actually one of the better looking ones, and it's from a Hydro collection, so a good investment. Moving on to the Scar 20, we have the Cyrex. Scar 20 was probably the hardest item to pick out on this list because there's not really a Scar that both looks good and is also a super perfect fantastic investment, but the Cyrex will generally fit this spot. Moving on to the Galil, I went ahead and chose the Cerberus. This is arguably the best looking Galil in the game, and the item is starting to get fairly old. As for the Krieg, I went with the Integral. Although its supply is not extremely limited, it's generally seen as the best Krieg money can buy, and many people consider it to be a lot better than every other Krieg in the game, so it should have solid demand going into CS2. As for the Scout, it would be a little silly not to pick the Death Strike. It's very expensive for a Scout, but it looks really nice and has solid upward potential. Alright guys, moving on to the SMGs. We have the PP Bizon Fuel Rod. Bizon was a hard one to pick out as well, but the Fuel Rod is pretty solid looking, and is from an Operation case. As for the MP9, I went with the Pandora's Box. Interestingly enough, this MP9 does have the same pattern as the Pandora's Box gloves, and although MP9s are not the most collectible item in the whole game, the Pandora's Box is a fantastic looking skin, and is surprisingly rare. As for the MP7, I went with the MP7 Fade. Fade got a pretty nice glow up in CS2, and it's a relatively limited item. As for the MAC-10, I went with the MAC-10 Gold Brick. Huge glow up in CS2, collection item. You kind of get the gist at this point. For the MP5, I actually chose the Souvenir Oxide Oasis, or Non-Souvenir if you want to spend a lot more money for something that'll be a better investment, or alternatively, since I don't think even spending $50 for an MP5 is really a good idea, I also picked the Autumn Twilly. MP5 is a more recent item, so it doesn't have as much investment potential on its skins, but these are the two that I would probably choose if I had to pick one. For the P90, I went with the Emerald Dragon. There's really only a cult following for this skin, but it does trade up to the Fire Serpent, which should be a fairly popular trade up going into the early days of CS2, and for me personally, I'm a big fan of the Fire Serpent and Emerald Dragon skin. And finally, for the UMP, I went with the UMP Blaze. Alternatively, if you want to spend a lot more money, you could go with the UMP Fade, but I think the Blaze is an acceptable choice. Moving on to the heavy items, which generally I would stay away from if you're looking for investments, but if you do want to complete your loadout, here's some rapid fire options. For the Negev, I went with the Phoenix Stencil. The M249, I went with the Impact Drill. For the Mag 7, I went with the Prism Terrace. For the Nova, I went for the Baroque Orange. For the Sawed-Off, I went with the Serenity. And for the XM, I went with the Elegant Vines. At this point, the only one I think I need to really explain here is going to be the Sawed-Off Serenity. And yeah, this one is definitely a more weird choice, but the main reason I went with the Serenity is because there's not really a lot of other great sawed-off options, and it's from the Chroma case, which means it trades up to the Dragon King and the AK Cartel, which are generally fairly popular items. The cartel could also see a fairly big uptick in its price and popularity when CS2 comes around. And as far as sawed-offs go, the Serenity is a fairly good looking skin. And that brings us to the end of all of our main items. But just to go ahead and complete this list, I wanted to give you guys agents and also a knife and gloves. Keep in mind though that gloves are generally a pretty poor investment, and agents are somewhat mid as well. For the knife, I went with the Bayonet Doppler. I think the Bayonet Doppler perfectly balances everything. The Bayonet is a relatively popular knife. It's somewhat on the older side as far as knives go. Doppler is going to be an incredibly popular finish in CS2, and this won't cost you over $1,000. For the gloves, I went with the Imperial Plaids. It's a bit of an older glove, so that is fairly important, but again, gloves not a very good investment. The Imperial Plaids will also relatively match the Bayonet Doppler somewhat well. For the T-side agent, I went with Miami Daryl. When it comes to agents, since they have such a huge difference in their popularity, it's pretty much just best to go with the most popular agent. Miami Daryl gives you a really nice flashy HUD display, and it's the most popular Daryl agent. And as for the CT agent, I went with the Goggles. Again, not a big fan of agents here, but this is probably going to be your best option. And with that, guys, that's going to bring us to the end of our list. Again, I wanted to make sure this video's runtime was not super long, so I couldn't go very in depth, but many of the factors that make these items good investments are covered on screen in the first chunk of this video. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like on the video. It costs you absolutely nothing. It's completely free and helps me a massive amount. If you want to get a better fundamental understanding of what makes items good investments, be sure to check out my beginner investment guide that I made recently. That'll also help you get a good understanding of the factors that make these items a good investment. Be sure to subscribe to Nalo for the best CS investment content anywhere else on YouTube. Check out my Discord server and my Twitter. You can contact me there with any questions you have. I will answer them completely for free always, because CS investment education should always be free. And finally, be sure to check out Skins Monkey. Thanks for watching the video, guys. If you have any questions on a specific item and want a further explanation, just be sure to leave a comment down below, and I'll get back to you when I have time. Peace.